planting, we need to make sure that we find a spot or a location in your garden where you haven't planted that crop before. Now this year I'm going to be planting my tomatoes in a different row. I last year planted my tomatoes in the farthest row, but to prevent any pests or disease, I need to make sure I rotate my crop and plant my tomatoes in a different row this year. So I'm going to bring the tomatoes forward to the nearest row that's closest to my shed. So it's a completely different spot in my garden, okay? And that's again to help prevent disease that may have occurred the previous year. And also to make sure that the soil has enough nutrients for the plant. Okay, so I'm going to teach you guys how to plant seeds. So this is a great tutorial for beginners. Before you start, you need to make sure you loosen up your soil through either just gently mixing the soil with a small shovel or trowel or your hands, especially if it's loose, and or you could use a rake. I like to just give it a nice quick rake to make sure that the soil is nice and loose, so that way when the seedlings come up, they have some softer soil to let their roots navigate through, okay? Some things that you can do to prepare your soil is you can make either compost tea and water your soil with compost tea. You can mix in some bone meal to help the roots grow and spread through the soil. And also you can add either a new layer of garden soil or some heavily composted dirt or soil or manure, and you can add that on top and mix it into the previous year's soil. But if you don't have anything at home, just use the soil that you have, and you can fertilize with organic fertilizer as you proceed through the year. Okay, so we're going to begin planting our rows. You want to make sure that you have a designated spot for where you're going to plant your specific crop. So I'm planting tomatoes, and I've already pre-labeled the area that I'm going to plant them in. This is just a marker because I have two different types of tomatoes. I'm going to do just the little cherry tomatoes, and these are the beefsteak ones, okay? So before you plant, you want to make sure that you read the directions on the back for days to sprout, seed depth, spacing, and plant spacing and row spacing. Tomatoes get large, so for the beefsteaks I can have 2 plants here. Now I am going to plant more than just 2 plants, and I'll thin down my seedlings or transplant them to different places or into pots if I have more success than expected. And same idea for the cherry tomatoes. The plants get quite large, especially by the end of the summer, so I want to make sure that I'm only planting a few. So I'll probably plant 4. That way I can thin my plants or transplant later, okay? So for these, it says plant spacing is 24 to 36 inches. So you really need to keep in mind how big things will get. I know they look small when you put them in the ground, but for instance, like broccoli gets huge. Whereas peas, they grow upward and in nets, and they're a lot thinner, so you could put more together. Same with something like a carrot, so you can get more of that. But these are different. A carrot, 1 seed equals 1 plant, but for a tomato, you're gonna have 1 plant that has a ton of tomatoes, which will eventually get very, very heavy, okay? And then you'll have to support them. So I'm gonna start off with the beefsteak. These we're gonna take 80 days to create a plant. The way I like to do it, usually what I do is when I plant seeds, I'll press in for rows. Like if it's a carrot, I'll press in the seed, the rows, just gently, and I'll have usually 2 rows, and then I'll plant my seeds accordingly, and then I'll just take my hand and I'll carefully and gently pull the soil over. But because I'm doing tomatoes, it's going to be a little bit different because I don't need that many. I'm gonna do 4. I'm just gonna use my finger and plant. Now, once these guys get going, I might move them around because I probably only want 1 here and 1 here at the most. So once these guys get a little bigger, I'll just gently scoop them and just redirect them. And that's something I do especially with pumpkins, because with pumpkins the leaves are going to tell you where the vine's going to go, and I really want to make sure that I direct the vines. So I'm going to take out some seeds in my hand, and I have 4 in my hand. So these are the beefsteaks. I'm going to gently just place them in and cover them up. Now, even if all 4 come up, I can't keep all 4 here. It'll be too much and too big. Now, the cherry tomatoes, it's going to be the same thing. So again, I'm going to do 4 holes. And then I'll probably rearrange later. Okay, so then I just take my seed packages and I just fold over the envelopes so I don't lose them. I can put them into storage. And before we're finished, we need to make sure we give our soil a gentle water. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need for getting your seeds started. Let me know how it goes in the comments section below the video.